a mubtada that's followed by these huruf, or a mudaf as well as one of the ظروف, it will always take the place of the predicate, just as knowledge is outstripped by etiquette. ظروف, a new term for us, is the plural of ظرف. And the ظرف is an ism that indicates the time or place in which an action occurred. In the chapter on the genitive form, right, the genitive case, the mudaf or mudaf ilayhi fragment, I included a list of words that are always treated like a mudaf, right? One of them being ma'a, for example, with, or the 6 directions, right? Amama, fawqa, khalfa, etc. I've also included a list of the adverbs that are used for places and the adverbs that are used for time, right? Some of them mu'arab, meaning that their endings may change within a sentence, and some of them mabni, they're fixed, right? So you have a complete list of all of these here. And the ظروف, right, the dharf, is from the mansubat, meaning that they're in the state of nasb. And because they form an idafa fragment, they never have tanween, right, or al. So let's take a look at an example using one of these ظروف. الطائر فوق البيت. الطائر, the bird, right? فوق, above. Notice it's in the state of nasb here, right? Like I mentioned, and like you'll see in this chart, one of the mansubat, al-bayti, right? The house. And we see here at the beginning of this sentence, at-ta'ir, right? An ism, which we can easily identify from it having al at the beginning. Also an indicator that it's ma'rifa, right? That it's definite, right? It's marfu'. We see this dhamma at the end here. And it's at the beginning of the sentence. So we've easily identified the mubtada. Now what follows the mubtada is not a singular indefinite ism in the state of rafa, right? Nor is it a harf jar, nor is it your typical mudaf or mudaf ilayhi fragment, your typical idafa fragment. Instead we see here fawqa, right? Fawqa, a dharf makan, right? Dharf of place, it's indicating the place of something occurring, right? Fawqa, above. And again, it's one of the mansubat, right? So it has a fatha here. No al at the beginning, no tanween at the end. And that's because the dharf forms an idafa fragment. So the word after becomes the mudaf ilayhi, right? Which is why the word after is in a state of jar, right? It's majroor. So if we don't find after the mubtada our typical singular ism in the state of rafa, that's indefinite, but we find a harf jar, or we find a mudaf or mudaf ilayhi fragment, or a dharf and mudaf ilayhi fragment, then we know that it takes the place of the predicate, right? And so fawqa al-bayti is our khabar in this sentence, right? And so we're going to have an implied is here, right? At-ta'iru, the bird, is fawqa al-bayti, above the house. Let's take a look at another example of the dharf. Al-jami'atu amama al-masjidi. Al-jami'a, the university. Amama, right? As you can see, one of the 6 directions, right? Amama, in front, right? Al-masjidi, right? The mosque. So we see here at the beginning of this sentence, al-jami'a. We can easily tell that this is an ism, right? We have the ta marbuta at the end. We also have alif lam, right? Al at the beginning, right? Telltale signs that we're dealing with an ism. It's in a state of rafa, right? It's marfu'. It's definite, right? And again, it begins this sentence. So here we've easily identified our mubtada. Now what follows is not our typical khabar, a singular ism that is indefinite and in a state of rafa, right? Nor do we see here a harf jar and its ism, or your typical mudaf or mudaf ilayhi fragment. Instead, we have here a dharf, right? Again, another dharf makan, right? It's indicating the place of something. Notice that it's in the state of nasb, right? It's one of the mansubat. It's one of those asma that will be in a state of nasb. And the dharf also creates an idafa construct. And so we see that here with al-masjidi, right? Kasra at the end. It's in a state of jar, right? It becomes a mudaf ilayhi in this case, in this instance, right? Following the dharf. And so when a mubtada is followed by these huruf, i.e. huruf al-jar, or a mudaf as well as one of the ظروف. The genitive case and the ظرف, again, they create the same type of construct, right? This idafa construct, but they have a completely different application, right? Here, the ظرف is indicating the time or place of something, right? But whenever you find these huruf or a mudaf as well as one of the ظروف, they will always take the place of the predicate. And so we've identified here very easily, right, our khabar. And so we know here there's an implied is or copula, right? The university is in front of the masjid. Al-jami'atu amam al-masjidi. Let's take a look at another example here using another dharf that's included in this list, right? Ba'da. We see here at the beginning of this sentence, ad-darsu, ad-darsu, the lesson or the class, right? Ba'da can be used as either a dharf makan or dharf zaman, meaning after, right? Ba'da. As-salati, right? The prayer. Ad-darsu, we see here, it's marfu'. It has alif lam at the beginning, al at the beginning. Easy telltale sign that it's an ism, right? But also letting us know that it's ma'rifa, it's definite, right? It begins this sentence, and so we've easily identified our mubtada. And we see that what follows is not a singular ism in the state of rafa, like we've seen in our previous lesson. For example, at-talibu salihun, right? The student is pious. At-talibu salihun, right? Singular ism, marfu', follows the mubtada, right? And it's indefinite, right? We don't see that after this mubtada. Instead, what we see is a dharf, right? A dharf. And we see that what follows is not a singular ism, again, one of the mansubat, right? So it's going to be in a state of nasab. It doesn't have alif lam at the beginning, no tanween at the end. Why? Because it creates this idafa construct, right? Similar to ma'a, right? And ma'a is on this list as well with, right? And so the word after, as-salah, notice it has this kasra at the end, right? It's in a state of jar because it's now a mudaf ilayhi, to ba'da, right? And so again, if a mubtada is followed by these huruf, i.e. huruful jar, or a mudaf as well as one of the ظروف, it will always take the place of the predicate, right? Which we see here, and we found our khabar, right? Letting us know that there's an implied is here, or copula, right? Ad-darsu ba'da salati. The class, the lesson, is after the prayer. So maybe someone asks, for example, mata ad-dars, right? When is the class? This would be the answer. Ad-darsu ba'da salah. So again, to drive this point home, if a mubtada is followed by these huruf or a mudaf as well as one of the ظروف, it will always take the place of the predicate, just as knowledge is outstripped by etiquette. And what do I mean here by just as knowledge is outstripped by etiquette?